The day my son stopped calling me his mother did not begin with shouting. It began with silence. I remember that morning clearly. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, not peaceful. I sat at the small kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Outside, the sky was gray, and a light rain tapped softly against the window, like it was trying not to disturb me. I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No message. For years, my son used to call me every Sunday morning. Sometimes the calls were short. Sometimes we talked longer. But he always said the same words before hanging up. "Love you, Mom." That Sunday, the phone stayed silent. At first, I told myself not to worry. He was busy. He had a life. A wife. Responsibilities. That is what mothers tell themselves when they don't want to feel hurt. But deep inside, something felt different. Not just a missed call. Not just a busy day. It felt like a door closing very slowly, without a sound. I stood up and walked to the sink, staring at my reflection in the window glass. My hair was thinner now. My face carried lines I did not remember earning. I looked like a woman who had lived many years for others and very few for herself. I whispered his name, softly, like a habit my heart had not learned to break. I thought back to the years when he was little. How he used to run into my arms after school. How he would hold my hand crossing the street, even when his friends teased him. How he once told me, "You're my whole world, Mom." I never imagined a day would come when I would feel like a stranger in his. Later that afternoon, my phone finally rang. My heart jumped just for a moment. But it was not him. When evening came, I sat alone at the dinner table, one plate in front of me, untouched. The ticking of the wall clock felt louder than usual. Each second sounded like it was counting something I was losing. That was the day I realized something had changed. Not suddenly, not loudly, but deeply. The day my son stopped calling me his mother was not marked by an argument or cruel words. It was marked by absence, by distance, by the quiet understanding that I no longer held the same place in his life. And as I sat there, listening to the rain and the clock and my own breathing, one painful thought kept returning. I had stood by him through everything. So, how did I become the one he left behind? Before my son became a husband, before his life filled with new routines and new priorities, there was just the two of us. I raised him mostly on my own. His father passed away when my son was still young, too young to understand why the house suddenly felt empty. I remember holding him that night, his small body shaking as he cried, asking when his father would come back. I had no good answers. So I held him tighter and promised I would always be there. Life after that was not easy. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. I learned how to be strong even when I felt tired. I learned how to smile even when my heart felt heavy. Every morning, I woke him up for school. I made his breakfast, even when money was tight. Some days it was just toast and tea, but I made sure it was warm. I packed his lunch with notes folded inside, small reminders that someone cared. When he was sick, I stayed up all night by his bed. When he was scared, I let him sleep beside me, his hand holding onto my sleeve. I missed gatherings, celebrations, and chances for my own happiness because I never wanted him to feel alone. As he grew older, I tried to give him space while still being present. I attended his school events quietly, sitting in the back, so he wouldn't feel embarrassed. I listened when he talked about his dreams, even when I did not fully understand them. He was a good boy. Kind. Respectful. He used to ask for my advice, even for small things. "What do you think, Mom?" Those words used to make me feel seen. When he met his wife, I was happy for him. Truly happy. I welcomed her into my home with an open heart. I cooked her favorite meals after learning what she liked. I spoke gently, careful not to overstep. At first, things felt normal. We shared meals. We talked politely. There were smiles, laughter, and plans for the future. But slowly, almost too slowly to notice, the tone began to change. My son's visits became shorter. His calls became less frequent. When he did call, he seemed distracted, like his mind was elsewhere. I told myself this was normal. that marriage changes things, that a mother must step back so her child can step forward. Still, there were moments that made my chest feel tight. Moments when I felt like I was standing just outside a room I once belonged in. One evening, I asked him how he was doing. He answered quickly, then said he had to go. He did not say, "Love you, Mom," that time. I stared at the phone after the call ended, wondering when those words had started to fade. I never complained. I never demanded. I thought love meant letting go quietly. But I did not realize how quiet my life was about to become. The distance did not come all at once. It arrived slowly, like a cold draft through a door left slightly open. At first, I blamed myself for noticing it too much. I told myself I was imagining things. But patterns are hard to ignore when they repeat. Weeks passed without a visit. Then months. When I called, the phone rang longer than it used to. Sometimes it went unanswered. When he did pick up, his voice sounded rushed. "I'll call you back, Mom," he would say. Most times, that call never came. I began to feel like I was interrupting his life instead of being part of it. So I called less. I waited more. Holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving came, and I was not invited. He said they were keeping it small. Christmas followed, and again there was an excuse. I received gifts by mail instead of hugs at the door. I smiled when I opened the packages. I thanked him on the phone. I told him everything was fine. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. I noticed changes when I did see them. My daughter-in-law spoke politely, but her eyes rarely met mine. She corrected me gently, but often. Small things. How I folded towels. How I cooked certain dishes. I told myself she was just particular. That everyone has their own way. But my son stopped defending me in moments when he used to. If I spoke, he stayed quiet. If she disagreed, he nodded along. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation I was not meant to hear. "I don't think she should come over so much," my daughter-in-law said softly. "It makes things uncomfortable." My son did not respond right away. Then he said, "I know." That single word sat heavy in my chest. After that, the invitations stopped completely. I learned about their lives through pictures online. Trips they took. Dinners they shared. Smiles captured without me in them. I left comments sometimes. Simple ones. "You look happy. Hope you're well." They were rarely acknowledged. The silence grew louder than any argument could have been. I began to question myself. Had I done something wrong? Had I said too much or not enough? I replayed conversations in my mind late at night. I wondered if my love had become a burden. Once, I asked my son directly, my voice careful and calm. "Did I upset you somehow?" He paused. "No, Mom. Everything's fine." But his tone told a different story. Fine does not sound distant. Fine does not forget birthdays. Fine does not stop calling someone mother. One day, I heard him introduce me to someone on the phone. "This is my mom," he said quickly, not even using my name. Something inside me shifted. I had not changed. I was still the same woman who stayed awake through fevers and fears. But somewhere along the way, my place in his life had quietly moved. And no one told me where it went. The moment that changed everything did not arrive with shouting. There was no raised voice. No slammed doors. It came quietly, the way most painful truths do. It was a simple Sunday afternoon. I had baked a pie that morning. Apple, his favorite since he was a boy. I wrapped it carefully, the way I always had, and took the bus to their house. I did not call ahead. I told myself a mother should not need permission. When I reached the door, I stood there for a moment. I fixed my hair. I practiced my smile. When my daughter-in-law opened the door, she looked surprised. Not happy. Not angry. Just surprised. "Oh," she said. "I didn't know you were coming." "I made a pie," I replied, holding it up like a peace offering. She stepped aside to let me in, but the air inside felt tight. My son was sitting on the couch, phone in hand. He looked up and froze. "Mom," he said, "you should have called." That sentence landed harder than any insult. I tried to laugh it off. "I was nearby," I said. I thought I'd stop in. We sat at the table, but no one was hungry. The pie stayed untouched between us. It felt like a guest that did not belong. Then my daughter-in-law spoke. "We've been meaning to talk to you," she said, folding her hands.
Her voice was calm.
Too calm. She explained how they needed space, how visits should be planned, how things had changed now that they were building their own life. I nodded slowly. I told myself to listen. I told myself not to cry. Then she said the words I still hear at night. "I think it would be better if you didn't come over so often." I looked at my son. I waited for him to speak, to soften it, to say something kind. He didn't. He stared at the table. His silence said more than words ever could. I realized then that this was not a conversation. It was a decision already made. I stood up quietly. I picked up the pie. "I understand," I said, though my heart did not. At the door, I paused. I wanted him to stop me, to say, "Mom, wait." He didn't. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt final. Outside, it had begun to rain. I stood there for a moment, holding the pie, feeling foolish and small. That was the day I understood. He hadn't stopped calling me his mother all at once. He had stopped choosing me. And in that silence, I learned exactly where I stood. The days after that Sunday moved slowly. Too slowly. Each morning felt heavier than the one before. I did not call my son. I told myself I was giving him space. The truth was I was afraid. Afraid he would sound distant. Afraid he would be polite instead of warm. Afraid I would hear, again, that quiet choosing of someone else. So I stayed home. That I washed the same cup again and again. I folded laundry that was already folded. I sat by the window and watched people pass, wondering who they were waiting for. At night, the house felt too big. Every sound echoed. The ticking clock reminded me of how much time had passed since he last called me Mom, with love instead of habit. One afternoon, I found an old photo album. It was tucked away in the bottom drawer, wrapped in a cloth. I hadn't opened it in years. There he was, my son, small hands, missing teeth, standing next to me, always next to me. I remembered how he used to reach for my hand in public. How he would say, "Don't go too far, Mom." How being needed once felt so natural. I realized something then. Children don't stop loving their parents overnight. They just grow into lives where love looks different. That understanding did not erase the pain, but it softened it. A week later, my phone rang. It was him. "Hi, Mom," he said. My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm.
I raplia.
There was a pause. A long one. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that day." I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't explain. I didn't handle it well, he continued. I should have spoken up. Tears filled my eyes, but I let them fall silently. "I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted," he said. I wanted to say so many things.
How lonely I felt.
How invisible I had become. But I chose one sentence. The truest one. I just wanted to know I still matter. There was another pause. Then he said softly, "You do." It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix everything. But it was a beginning. We didn't talk long. We didn't solve years of distance in one call. But when we hung up, my house felt a little warmer. I learned that day that resolution is not always a reunion. Sometimes it is simply being heard. And sometimes that is enough to help you breathe again. Time passed, gently this time. Not rushing. Not dragging. Just moving forward, one quiet day at a time. My son began calling once a week. Sometimes the calls were short. Sometimes they were filled with silence, more than words. But silence, I learned, is not always distance. Sometimes it is comfort. That I stopped waiting by the phone all day. I stopped measuring my worth by how often it rang. That was a hard lesson, but an important one. I began taking care of myself again. Slow walks in the morning. Tea in my favorite cup. Music playing softly in the background. I started writing letters. Not to send. Just to release what my heart had been holding. I wrote about the years I gave. The meals cooked. The worries swallowed. The love that never asked for anything back. And as I wrote, I realized something surprising. I was proud. Proud of the woman who stayed gentle even when she felt forgotten. Proud of the mother who loved without conditions. Proud of myself for surviving the quiet hurts no one talks about. One afternoon, my son came to visit. No big announcement. No grand apology. He stood at the door, holding a small bag of groceries. "I thought we could cook together," he said. We did. We chopped vegetables. We laughed at small mistakes. For a moment it felt like old times. Before he left, he hugged me. Not rushed. Not forced. "Thank you for being patient with me," he said. I smiled. "I never stopped being your mother," I replied. When the door closed behind him, I did not cry. I sat down and felt calm, because I finally understood this truth. Being chosen does not always look the way we expect. Love does not disappear just because it changes shape. And sometimes, dignity is learning to stand strong even when love feels quiet. To every woman listening who has felt forgotten by her own child, you are not invisible. Your love mattered. It still does. And even if they forget to say it, you were always enough.